Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Magenta Edge Digital Workshop Series. My name is Karl Franz Williams, and I am a restaurateur and mixologist, entrepreneur. I am excited to have you here. I'm the owner of Cocktail Lounges, 67 Orange Street in Harlem, New York City, the Anchor Spa in New Haven, Connecticut, and coming soon, Uncle Waithley's Ginger Beer, which will be out later this year. So very excited to be here. This is workshop number 5 of 8. And so every Thursday until April 1st, we will have a new workshop about different facets of the small business experience. So we're happy to have you here. And so this one is called a Small Business Guide to Accessing Resources. To see all of the articles and stories on Magenta Edge or to register for upcoming workshops, please go to tmobile.com/magentaedge. We'll be live tweeting throughout today's workshop, so feel free to jump in and join the conversation. I'm excited to be here, to have the opportunity to share this conversation and to have this discussion with you. It's extremely important, and so I'm happy to be here and to have the honor of doing this with you today. So this one, Small Business Guide to Accessing Resources, and a little bit about myself. Why am I here? Why am I here doing this? You may be asking me. For those who may have researched or seen who I am, great. But I want to tell you a little bit about my backstory and how I got to where I am today, and have the opportunity to do something like this. So my experience has been a little bit different from the average sort of small business restaurateur or entrepreneur. I actually started out in big business. My degree is from Yale University. I have a degree in electrical engineering. You're like, all right, that's pretty far away, but it is. I learned to problem solve, which is a key skill that I still apply to what I do today. I started my career out with Procter & Gamble in the manufacturing division. I worked in a manufacturing plant, making sure that the facility's equipment ran well. And then quickly discovered that in the world of Procter & Gamble, it was all about marketing and brand. Procter is an incredible school of brand management, and I wanted to get into that and be a part of that. So I was doing well. I was able to convince the company to allow me to move over to brand. So I moved from manufacturing to brand, and took an opportunity in Puerto Rico, which was pretty amazing. It gave me the opportunity to not only learn brand management with Procter, but also to learn a second language. And I'm very proud to say that I am fluent in Spanish, and it's a great asset to have a second language, and something that I recommend for anyone who has a chance to do something like that. I spent a few years at Procter & Gamble and brand, and then decided to move from Puerto Rico back to New York, where I grew up. I'm a New York City native. I grew up in Brooklyn and finished high school in Hempstead, Long Island. And then I moved back from Puerto Rico to Harlem, a neighborhood I hadn't lived in, but an incredible, historic, and amazing neighborhood. And that's where I reside today. So all of this has taught me has given me a strong basis or background in classical branding and business development. And so that's sort of the approach or the foundation that I build from in doing business and the things that I do today as an entrepreneur. And it's also positioned me to really to kind of combine those two worlds in a sense. So today I'm on the advisory board of multiple organizations, both within my industry and outside. So I'm on the advisory board of the New York Hospitality Alliance, the New York Alliance Against Sexual Violence, very important work that we do there. Harlem Park to Park, an organization that I founded, and I'll tell you a bunch more about that later on. And the Bar, which is an organization that puts on lots of educational programs for the craft spirits industry, and also holds the Bar 5-Day, which is a program that essentially certifies you as almost like a sommelier of cocktails. It's like the most sophisticated sort of learning in cocktail and spirits you can do. So that's a little bit about who I am. That is me on the cover there. I mean, that is me in front of one of my restaurants there. I actually do ride a skateboard, key fact. So that is actually my skateboard. And And my sneaker game is pretty dope. So I don't know if my lady would agree, but I think my sneaker game is pretty dope. So anyway, that's me there. So how does someone go from being this sort of classically trained marketer to an entrepreneur, and particularly a mixologist and bar owner? For me, the path was based on something I always felt. I always knew and felt that I was meant to be an entrepreneur. I had these ideas, these dreams, this vision, this passion. And although I worked for great companies that gave me an opportunity to do some things there, I always felt like my story would never be fully complete until I was able to step out and express my ideas fully on my own. And so it was a calling. I wasn't sure exactly what it was going to be. I opened my first restaurant, Society Coffee, while still working at Pepsi. I saw the opportunity to bring a craft, like sort of artisanal coffee shop to Harlem. There wasn't one at the time. And so that's what led me to opening Society Coffee. It taught me the business, is where I first learned the restaurant business. And then while working on an innovation project at Pepsi, I discovered the craft cocktail world, and I was mesmerized. The idea of being able to take a culinary experience in a glass was something that was new and unique to me. And I thought it was really amazing. I thought the opportunity and what it represented was going to really explode. And it has. This was 13, 14 years ago, and craft cocktails weren't everywhere at that point. The ubiquity with which you see every great restaurant has a cocktail menu these days. That wasn't the case then. And so, but I saw that was the direction that things were going, and I wanted to be a part of that. So that's what led me to ultimately deciding to leave Pepsi and open my first bar, which was 67 Orange Street. This was back in 2008, December of 2008. And since then, I've opened several other restaurants, the Solomon and Cuff, which was a rum bar, and the Anchor Spa, which is actually, the Anchor is a historic bar, and it's been there since 1939. I took it over in 2015 and sort of reimagined what it is and transformed it into what it is today, a cocktail bar celebrating the rich history of the past. So a lot of people ask me, 67 Orange Street, where's the name come from? A lot of what I do is inspired by history, and so it is the last known address of All Max Dance Hall. All Max Dance Hall was one of the first Black-owned bars in New York City, and the place where tap dance was created. So pretty cool story. I won't give you all the details now, but if you feel free to go to our website, check it out and see what we do. And so that's me. I made a decision early on in my career as a bar owner to be more than just the business guy behind there, and got to know craft cocktails extremely well, and craft bartending. I am bar certified, which means that program I was talking about a little bit earlier, the sommelier of cocktails. I've been through that, and one of the few people in the world who've done that. So this is an industry that I feel a lot of passion for. It is part of who I am. It doesn't fully define me. Like I said, we have the ginger beer coming out later this year. I have dabbled in other entrepreneurial, exploits in real estate, in tech, and so there are other areas. And as an entrepreneur, ultimately an entrepreneur, but these are the things that I'm best known for. So to tell you a little bit more about 67 Orange Street and Anchor, 67 Orange Street I opened 12 years ago. So we're 12 years old. The Anchor Spa is about 4.5 years old now. And we've gotten great press and recognition. One of the things that I'm most proud of is that we're still relevant. 12 years in, a lot of places become sort of the old news, and people are still discovering both places today. There's still a lot of buzz around both places. And that is, I attribute that success to really developing and focusing on strong branding and marketing. We have a bunch of different offerings today. We've sort of pivoted to make sure that we can do the right things during the pandemic. And that's led to some really great numbers. Before things sort of closed up again, we were at 80% pre-COVID, and at sales at 67 Orange Street, and actually at Anchor, we were doing better than before COVID as a result of the work that we did. So I am very proud of the two businesses and their position right now. And one of the other things I'll mention, 67 Orange Street, and this is particularly relevant right now, we opened during the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009. And so a lot of the skills that I am describing in this webinar today are a function of talking from the standpoint of a survivor. We survived that first recession, learned some really key lessons in that surviving that recession. And now, as we go through this pandemic and the current recession, we're in a great place to be able to leverage those learnings and turn them into the success that we're having right now. So my goal is to really pass on a lot of this information to you and to make sure that, you as an entrepreneur are able to do some of the same things. So, let's ground this conversation. Let's kind of put it into perspective on what we're trying to do here. So what is access? Like I said, I guess I'm a bit of a nerd, so I like to go back to the dictionary definition of what that is. So access, I'll read this here, is freedom or ability to obtain or make use of something. And second definition is to be able to use, enter, or get near something. So what is the something? In our case, the thing that matters here, the thing that we want access to, is access to capital, access to resources, access to the things that you need to be able to be successful in your business. And so obviously it's extremely important to have access. And so I'll tell you a little bit. There is a difference between sort of having access and not having access. And if you're an entrepreneur of color, this is going to really resonate with you, because the reality of it is, a lot of us start our businesses and we do these things, and we're working with limited resources to get this going. And so what we get really good at is how to hustle, right? How to make things happen. So when I say hustle, I'm not talking about doing anything illegal, right? I'm not talking about that at all. What I'm really talking about is this idea of like figuring it out, problem solving to the nth degree, figuring out how to make things happen. And the reason for doing that is because of a lack of access to resources, access to capital. So let me drive this point home further. Within our country, there is a history of economic disparity, of basically, of a system that was designed to really keep entrepreneurs and sort of people of color in a different economic paradigm than the rest of America. And there's tons of documentation on it. You can dig into how various programs throughout time were oftentimes, there were these ideas and starts and things, but it never really materialized for people of color. So you go on, you start from slavery, free labor for 400 years, and then you go into the Jim Crow era and the basically obliteration of every sort of building of the Black community, whether it was Black Wall Street in Tulsa, the GI Bill, which didn't apply to a lot of the Black GIs, but gave opportunities for some of the white GIs coming back from World War II to gain access to buy property. Property is one of the biggest ways that you build wealth, and that wasn't available. The ownership of real estate wasn't available, or was not readily available for people of color, for Black people in particular. And so over the years, this ongoing system has created real problems, real economic disparities. And so when we talk about this has become so apparent this year, right? Because the pandemic showed the disproportionate death rate from COVID blew open this idea that things were sort of equal. Like all of a sudden, it was blatantly obvious that there were disparities, that healthcare, there were huge disparities in healthcare, which led to a lot of underlying conditions, comorbidities that were costing the lives of Black Americans. And then you started to see the disparities in education and other systems. And then, of course, economics, particularly when it comes to Black businesses. Black businesses were struggling and are struggling in having greater problems, in surviving the pandemic than white-owned businesses. So, as an example, I have a couple stats on this page right here. 30 points. That is the gap between the percent of Black-owned businesses prior to the pandemic. This is in 2019, who said we are in distress. was 57% of Black-owned businesses versus, or at risk or in distress, versus white businesses at 27%. This is in 2019. This is pre-pandemic. So you can imagine what the pandemic did in terms of creating greater damage here for Black businesses. When I talk about access, access to wealth, right? Like the average white family's wealth is 8 times that of the average Black family, 188K versus 24K. I mean, these numbers are really hard to get around when you're looking at access, when you need access to be able to open or start or maintain your business. And not only does this show itself as just access to capital, but being able to get the information, the intel, the resources that you need for your business, it just blows this great hole. So this is very, very important stuff. And obviously, if you're here, you know that. And I am just, again, I hope that you can really take away from this all of the experience and learning that I've had to this point, and use these resources to sort of overcome some of this. Ultimately, our country needs to do better and figure things out to help the situation more. And I will say that this summer and sort of George Floyd and the like, there are more resources than I think I've ever seen for entrepreneurs of color. Shout out to T-Mobile for doing this program and putting this on. This is fantastic. And there are a lot of stuff out there. And so more like never before, if you are paying attention, you have to grab these resources and take advantage of this opportunity. So, like I said, this little quote here said, the ratio of white family wealth to Black family wealth is higher today than at the start of the century. So, but this is an opportunity to try to change this and to do something about this. So, we're going to dig into a few areas today. I like to think of access in sort of 3 categories: access to information and opportunity, access to capital, and then access to community networks. And we'll dig into sort of why all of that makes sense and how you can gain access to this stuff. Now, one thing to note here is that there is no one size fits all. I don't want you to think that everything on here is for everyone. But the idea is that there is a method to it, and you can dig into that method, find what makes sense for you, and apply those things. But there should be something in here for everyone. If you're an entrepreneur, you'll find something in here. But again, finding the right combination is up to you. It's for you to take this information, dig into it, and really make something from it. All right, so let's jump into our first lesson. Lesson number 1, accessing information and opportunity. And I like to call this one "Stay Woke," because in business, it is so important to stay woke, to be aware of what's going on, to have the right information at the right time, to be able to optimize what you are doing. It is key. If you can imagine, if you were going to battle and you did not have the right information, resources, nuance, everything that you needed when you got onto that battlefield, you're going to get out-strategized, outmaneuvered, and beaten every single time. Well, business is the same. Information is key. Information is key to winning and being successful in business. So that is why this is the first topic that we're going to dig into. So what types of information are there? I like to think of this information and this information and opportunity as sort of 3 different categories. One is intel, second is nuance, and the third is knowledge. So intel, nuance, and knowledge. So what is intel? Intel is information that is not it's not obvious. It's not everywhere. Intel are those things that only a few people know, that are they're just not super present information. And what it does is this is the type of information that gives you a competitive advantage. It's about being in the know. And so intel, that's what intel is. And I'll give you an example in my experience. One of the I mentioned that I'm in the New York Hospitality Alliance, and we were part of there was a small group of us who were sort of off kind of talking, and one of the points that came up was that what we're seeing in the market right now, as far as landlords go, is that the concessions that landlords were so eager to give, when they say so eager to give, because it hasn't been totally that way. Landlords have been very sort of, we'll take this, slow. We'll kind of see how these things are going. But the concessions that we saw sort of earlier in the pandemic, and particularly in the winter, that landlords are starting to pull some of those back. They're not giving quite as many concessions now because there's a lot of optimism. There's sort of a look forward of saying, hey, like this is, like the things are turning around. The vaccine is coming out. Positivity rates are dropping, hospitalizations, deaths, et cetera, are all dropping. And so it's a good time if you haven't thought through what your negotiation or was going to be with your landlord. Now's the time to jump in. So that's a great example of intel. This was, the person who we were talking with was a real estate broker who was saying that, hey, I saw this happening, particularly for new leases. I'm not seeing that happening as much. It's starting to slow down. So if you want to do something, do it now because there's a tight window. That is intel. That's information that's not all out there. Another example relevant to us in sort of the restaurant business is, something as simple as the restaurant owner, a couple storefronts down from me, calling me and saying, hey, health inspector just stopped through. Just so you know, the health inspectors are on the block. They're taking a walk, right? So that, again, if I didn't have that relationship with that other business owner, I might not have known that. And, I try to keep my places always ready so that inspector, no matter when, how, whatever, they walk in, we're good to go. Our places are clean and safe, et cetera. But at the same time, just being, we're in the middle of service, whatever, just being prepared that this could be happening is a huge benefit to us. So that's what intel is. Nuance is about, is I think oftentimes what separates the good from the great. It's about knowing those little details that if you know that little detail about how things are done, you can really do more for your business. And a great example is, I was early in my restaurant career. I applied for the Clinton Foundation. They had a mentorship program, and I applied for the mentorship program, was accepted. And my mentor was Union Square Hospitality Group. And so obviously, if you know Union Square, they are Danny Mayer's group. I mean, fantastic restaurateurs, hugely successful. So this was a great opportunity for me to get to learn the business from those who knew it. And so when they came in, they looked at what I was doing. The thing that they talked about was, okay, you've got a mind for marketing, and your product and everything is great. The piece that you're missing here, the thing that you're sort of that's needed that you don't totally get, is PR and how important PR is to what you're doing. And I thought it was so unique that Union Square found PR to be so important that they actually had an internal PR group at that time. That's how important they saw it to being a driver for their business. So it wasn't just the marketing, it wasn't just the social media, it was being able to get these stories to come out in various press and publications that they felt was a huge a key driver. Another example, I remember saying, hey, my fridge just broke. I don't know what to do. And someone from there saying, oh, we'll send our sous chef over to take a look at it. I said, sous chef? You're sending your sous chef to take a look because my refrigerator is not working? And they said, yeah. We often look not just for a sous chef who's a great cook, but one who's handy, who knows how to fix things in a kitchen. You need to have that person on your team as well. This is nuance. These are things that the greats are doing, and the businesses that are successful are doing, and knowing those little differences can be the difference between being good to being great. And then knowledge. Knowledge is huge. It's a broad area. It is all the day-to-day basics it takes to run your business. I'm a proponent. I think all of us need to think in terms of constantly learning. We don't ever stop learning. When you're in business, the day that you think you can't learn anything else, whether it's from your staff, whether it's from reading whatever, whether it's from checking out some of the resources that I'm going to go through. The day that you decide that you don't have to learn anything else is the day that you are going to start to see your business decline, because there's always something new to learn. There's always a new approach. There's always ways to gain competitive advantages, etc. So knowledge is important. It's important that it's continuous. So let's talk about some of the resources to getting some of these things. So for Intel, one of the great ways is to join your local trade organizations. I'm a member of all of the key ones, are the ones that I find important for my industry. As an example, the National Restaurant Association, as well as the local chapters of the National Restaurant Association. Like I said, I'm on the board of the New York Hospitality Alliance. I'm a member of my local Chamber of Commerce. So these are all areas where I am able to work with various like organizations to get information, and just by being a part of these organizations, I oftentimes get information that others who may not have chosen not to join these organizations miss out on. And that information has been critical for me in really being able to grow my business. One of the other areas here is one of the other areas here that I think is important is, and one that you know, maybe a little bit less commonly used, is oftentimes your local city council person, or your local politician has a lot of great information, intel about what's happening, what's coming in, what businesses are coming in, what real estate opportunities there are, what programs, and being in touch with their office can help you find out some of this information before the broader blast and things, email blast, whatever they may be doing. And that, again, is a great opportunity. It's great for you. You get to know what's going on. Oftentimes, it's great for them as well, because they get to hear from you. So this is one, I think, not often used, but I've found to be very effective, is to get to know your local politician and to establish some sort of relationship with them or with their office. You don't always have to agree with their politics, and this is not necessarily about promoting anyone's politics at all, but it's about an exchange of information. So on nuance, advisors, I mentioned I'm on the advisory board of several organizations, but I also have people that advise me, both formally and informally. It could be family members, could be friends, it could be people I know in business, but it's important to be able to have people you can bounce information off of. You can meet them at the local trade groups. You can meet them, on LinkedIn. People you went to school with, people who know, friends of friends. But you want to find advisors, people you can count on to provide information to you. Now, there's a little bit different, in my opinion, between an advisor and a mentor. Mentors can be harder to find, and it's a longer-term relationship. A mentor not only advises, but provides access directly. They help you get into things. They can send resources your way. They take on a more formal role in ensuring that you're successful. But mentors are important as well. And then experienced insiders, whatever industry you're in, it's important to have people on your team are working with you that are experienced in that industry. When I started in the bar business, I was a marketer, right? I was a marketing guy. What I knew about the actual industry was relatively small. I was working on things at Pepsi. And so what really made the difference for me early on was recognizing that and being able to hire and bring in experienced insiders who could help me understand the nuance of what it took to be successful, who took the textbook, knowledge that maybe I had, right, from books I read about, starting a coffee shop, starting a bar, whatever, and made that practical and made it real. And in terms of informational resources, there are tons and tons of great information and resources out there. Of course, there's great books. I mentioned 4 here. They each sort of touch a different area, but all very important. I mean, all great books to read. Oftentimes, I'm very busy. I imagine a lot of us are very busy. We don't have a time to do a lot of reading. So it's just choosing a couple, a few good books and getting into them. So Good to Great with Jim Collins, Measure What Matters. So Good to Great about growing and really taking your business to the next level. Measure What Matters, knowing to understand what's important in your business, pitch anything, being able to get your elevator pitch, your story out there and get people to follow, get involved. Systems thinking, how you overall think about setting up and structuring your business. There's online publications that are pretty great. The Economist, The Insider is just that, a lot of inside information. I mean, when you think about some of these are big business. So he's like, oh, so this is big business. How does that apply to me as a small business person? But I think big, right? Like think about you want to learn from the big minds and how they're thinking about it, because those big techniques just give you, a great way to reapply those learnings to what you're doing in your business, and ultimately you want your business to scale anyway. Blogs, podcasts. There's again some really, really, really great blogs. My absolute favorite is Hello Alice. Alice this is an incredible blog. If you're not on it, sign up right now. Like this entire presentation, everything that's on that, almost, access to resources and opportunity, they're all there. There are grants, there's training programs, there's like lectures. It's all there. Fantastic place to go. Professor Galloway's blog. Yeah, he was an entrepreneur, now doing some now professor as well. Great taking ideas and concepts and making them very simple to understand. Earn Your Leisure podcast and Hello 7 with Rachel Rogers. Again, these are sort of great podcasts, particularly for women entrepreneurs. And then there's some programs and incubators. If you have an opportunity to sign up for one of these, definitely go for it. I like the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program, because not only is it a great learning and sort of incubator or accelerator, it is also a great way to build a network, a community, and to have people that can advise and be a part of your team. Chobani has a great, incubator if you're in the food world. So this lesson is, for a lot of folks, who are like, hey, this probably should have been in the first, but it's all about accessing capital. And accessing capital is key. Like you cannot successfully manage and sustain your business if you don't have the capital that you need when you need it. We often hear about big tech companies that are raising money constantly, and it makes sense. Small business, we don't always have that opportunity. Sometimes we have to figure out and know very early on what it is we need. And go after that exact amount, because it's going to be, which makes it much harder. Forecasting is a hard thing to do, and it gets harder sometimes as a small business to be able to figure out your needs. But I do recommend taking some real time and thinking that through, and thinking it through from the standpoint of a real honest assessment, not an optimistic one. This is where, as entrepreneurs, we are extremely optimistic by nature. This is an area where you want to sort of temper your optimism and focus on realism. And what is it really going to take for me to get to where I need to get to? How much is that going to cost? And then, mark that up a little bit. So if you think it's going to cost you $100, get 110, but get the right amount so that you have what you need. So that's key here in terms of accessing capital. First starts with honest assessment of what your needs are, and a really honest, thoughtful analysis to determine what your needs are. Then once you do that, there are several ways that you can raise this money. You can raise it through investors. You can raise it through loans, or through grants. So let's dig a little bit into loans. Right now, investors, I'll go into investors in a little bit, but let's talk about loans. Right now, if you have not applied for PPP or EIDL, do it now. These are incredible rates. Even if your PPP loan is not forgiven, that 1% interest rate cannot be beaten. Same thing for the EIDL at 3.75% and a 30-year term. Like these types of terms for business loans don't exist outside of these two programs. It's very hard or very difficult to find something out there like this. And so if you have not applied, do apply. Biz to Credit and Lindio are two great areas to go for to apply for your PPP. They've done tons of them. They have lots of support resources to help you in getting your application done, and they can help you get that done. Thing to note, PPP is the opportunity to apply for PPP ends in 20 days. On March 31st, there's no indication right now that that date will be extended. So get in there fast. EIDL, I think, is open till the end of this year. You apply for the EIDL, which is the Economic Impact Disaster Loan, directly from the SBA. You can go to their SBA site and make sure that you look for COVID relief, and under there, the EIDL. Within every community, there's what we call CDFIs. These are community development financial institutions. And these are banks that have a specific charter to focus on the community. They are also often doing PPP loans. They are a great resource, again, because they provide a lot of resources to help you in completing your application. And the government has carved out specific money for these organizations to lend to borrowers in their community. And so now's a great time to jump in and go after those. I also like to point out that if you're using Square for your business, they have done a great job with PPP loans. They are able to get them, their portal for getting the information in is oftentimes, I found to be simpler than some of the bank portals. The information is organized really well, and they're very efficient at getting you your money and getting it quickly. So if you do use Square for your business, I suggest that's a great resource, Square Capital, to look at for getting a PPP loan. What I really want you to stay away from right now, I did mention you can potentially use home equity. There is some benefit there because interest rates are really low right now. But I also caution you, because you don't want to end up ultimately losing your home and your business, at the same time. So it's something to be very careful about. You don't want to take more home equity than you can afford to service. So just be careful there. But what I really want you to stay away from, because it can be easy right now. I mean, PPP and EIDL, while great programs and probably the most democratic money I've seen in my lifetime, going through the first Great Recession, the only people who got any bailouts were the big banks, right? And so there wasn't money like this before. And so this is actually pretty great, but there are still issues with it. PPP is based on the size of your payroll. A lot of us have really small businesses, or we're sole proprietors. And so the size of our PPP is small, and it doesn't give us what we need to ultimately sustain. EIDL is based on gross profit, which is your cost of goods sold, subtracting your cost of goods sold from your gross revenue, and then dividing that by 2. That sort of maxes out what your EIDL can be, and with a cap of 150,000. That being said, that's not, I mean, if your sales aren't, if you don't have big sales yet, a lot of small businesses are 25, 50K and under. The amount of what you can get there is also limited. So there are issues with these programs. They're not the end and be all. There are some carve outs for Black and brown businesses within these programs, but you just want to, but you still, even though that's the case, is try to avoid factoring, right? So that's the place where you don't want to go. I didn't get a PPP, I didn't get an EIDL, but I got this advertisement for someone who will, they will give me my future credit, they'll give me a loan against my future credit card receivables or my inventory or something like that. What this really does is it's a desperation move, and it takes away from your future cash flow, which means it's going to be that much harder to run your business. Right now, we've deferred a lot of expenses, right? Like during the pandemic, there's a lot of opportunity to defer expenses in various communities, depends on what community you're in. But deferring expenses and then adding on top of that limited cash flow means those expenses come up at the same time that your cash flow is less, and all you've done is postponed a really big problem or made a problem even bigger. And so you want to be really, really, really careful with that. I also don't recommend, stay away from hard money. The idea is like these loans with interest rates that really crush you. If you can, you want to avoid daily drafts and things like that. All this does is it hurts your cash flow. The money seems exciting. You're like, I really need this money. But your chances of success when you're limiting yourself are less so. So we want to stay away from those kind of things. Sometimes a micro loan might seem like a great way, but I talked before about how important it is to know how much you actually need. And if the amount of that micro loan doesn't get you what you actually need, it oftentimes is not the help you need. And that's that honest conversation you have to have with yourself. But grants are, right now, there is more free money again than I've ever seen. And so there are grants, there's tons of programs. I mentioned that Hello Alice blog, a great place to go and look for grants from all around the country. Every state has various grants and resources that they are offering. The key here is that, is they're often very competitive. So it's about your story. It's having a good story to tell. And you want to build your elevator pitch. You have to know and be able to say in a second, really quick, this is what I'm about. This is what I'm trying, my business is, and be able to have that story tight so you can write it in a way that's very compelling, or tell it in a video, or whatever the criteria for that particular grant is. And then also knowing the sort of romantic parts of your story, the things that make your story special and unique. You also want to have that. So the most successful grant pitches are the ones that have a compelling business proposition. They understand what the problem is that they're trying to solve. They understand what their solution is and why it's unique and special. And then they can put this really great story around that. You put those three things together, and you will be well positioned to win some of these grants. So having a really clear business proposition, knowing the why and what makes your solution special or unique, and then being able to put a really great story around that, or telling your story in a really compelling way, will help you in terms of winning these grants. So I mentioned before that we were going to talk more about investors. There's so many ways to structure a deal with an investor. This could be an entire class on its own. So I'm not going to spend too much time here on this particular slide, but there's just a few questions to ask yourself as you're thinking about bringing in an investor. First of all, don't do it from a point of desperation. If you're approaching an investor and you're desperate and they can tell that, you're less likely to get the deal you want. Number one, because they have questions about why is this guy desperate, or this person desperate. Two, there's this idea of if there's the sharks out there, the ones who can smell blood and will say, this guy is desperate, or this person's desperate. So, I'm going to charge them some ridiculous rate or whatever, for what they're doing, or I'm going to try to gain control of their business. So the key here is going in with confidence, knowing what you're about, and then being able to make the decision about and separate out the idea. Equity doesn't necessarily mean control. You can give away. Equity has a lot to do with the actual ownership of the business. Control has to do with the day-to-day operation and being able to make decisions about your business. Giving away the ability to be able to make decisions about your business is something you want to avoid at all costs. It's important that you have the control of the operation, the equity piece, and what happens, to the business as it's sold. That is something where you can have more flexibility. So you don't have to own, as much, but you do want 100% of the control. Vesting is an idea that basically says, when does this equity that you're giving out, when does it become real? When does the value truly accrue? And it doesn't have to be day one. If you're bringing in, or you're giving an investor a stake and you're asking for other things from their advice, support, whatever, and you're not sure how that's going to go, being able to have a period of time before they actually do own whatever they own is the idea of vesting. Dividend priority. Oftentimes investors like to see to get paid out first, off of dividends or returns. That's something that you can figure out how you want to structure that. You want to make sure, though, that in doing that, you are maintaining something for yourself in that priority too. So it doesn't have to be a complete windfall just for the investors out of early returns. It can be partial. But the idea is that, we always talk about paying ourselves first. That's critical in business. Make sure you don't leave yourself out. of whatever priority that you do. There has to be something in there for you, because as an entrepreneur, you need to be confident that you can take care of yourself, and that gives you the clear head you need to be to focus on and to win in your business. But whatever money you take, there is good money and there is bad money. And I mentioned a little bit before about that, but this is if you take nothing else from here about in terms of accessing capital, the thing that I would encourage you to do is to get to know the difference between good money and bad money. And bad money can tank you. It can destroy your business. It can take away your ownership. It can leave you with nothing at the end of the day after all your hard work. Or a lot of of collections and lawsuits and things that you just don't want. So when you think about good money, the key is to think about the 3 R's. The 3 R's with a little understanding on top, right? So what are the 3 R's? The 3 R's are reputable, reliable, and reasonable. Those are the 3 R's: reputable, reliable, and reasonable. Reputable. Choose your money sources carefully, whether it's an investor, loan, grant, whatever. Make sure that it is coming from a reputable source. You hear that I'm sure you've heard the joke before, like you don't want anyone to come and break your kneecaps because you didn't give them a payment or return when they expected it. That's not the way you run your business. When you're stressed out because you're so worried about having to deal with these sort of these payments or things you have to make, you're not making good business decisions. Take safe money, take reputable money. It's just not worth it. I've never taken a dime from an irreputable source, and I encourage you not to do that either. Reliable. When you ask or when you raise money or when you bring money in, the last thing that you want is for that money to not be there when you need it. So you get the commitment and they're like, okay, you're going to have this money in there on Saturday. And you're like, okay, great. On Saturday, so you go out and you schedule a payment to a vendor that you need to be able to make on that Saturday. And, the money is not there on Saturday. Now, what do? This vendor is like, okay, well, I thought you said, you were going to have this money there. And then you go back to that source and they're like, oh, it's not going to be this Saturday. It's going to be 2 Saturdays. And the next thing you know, by the time the money gets there, you now have a big issue that you need if the money ever does get there. And so you can't make commitments, you can't forecast, you can't run your business if you don't have reliable sources of funding. Reasonable. You want to ensure that the terms of whatever money you get are going to be reasonable, are not going to put your business in greater both current or future risk and create more problems for you. Those terms, the interest rate, the repayment term, the ownership, the equity, the dividend priority, all of this stuff, the vesting, all of that needs to be reasonable, and reasonable when taking your specific and unique business situation into consideration. Like I said, it's not one size fits all, right? And then the last thing there is understanding, right? And so this is kind of a softer one, but things don't always go according to plan. And when they don't, you want your money sources to be willing to reconsider whatever their terms were, if that makes sense. But at a minimum, you want them to understand your situation. If it's going to take a little bit longer for you to grow the business to a certain place because you have a pandemic, right? Who knew, right? Like, you don't want that source to be like, I don't care, it's whatever, I need this, has to happen, right? Like, they have to be understanding. And so if you can take the 3 R's and apply this to with a little understanding, the 3 R's with a little understanding, and apply that to any source you have, like that is then you will know that you are getting the good money. I have a piece that I've written about this that'll be on T-Mobile for Business. Definitely take a look at it. I dig into this a lot more. All right, the last lesson here, we're going to talk about accessing community networks, and I've talked a little bit about this. Being part of your community is important for many reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is because you have the opportunity to share and to create a collective pool of knowledge. I mentioned before that I was on the board of the Harlem Park to Park, and the executive director here, great quote, says, I don't assume I'm smarter. I let people tell me what they need. A good community network is all about that, about understanding the needs of its members. And so that helps you with determining intel, getting the information that you need. I talked about before, that sort of information that like can help you. And then resources as well, everything from potential business opportunities to well-priced vendors to critical relationships, all great things that you can get from being a part of a community network. So some types of community networks, there are local trade associations, BIDs, which are business improvement districts, community economic development groups, chambers of commerce, business incubators, accelerators, business schools. If you're a local business school, they often have great community programs, small business development centers. And bottom line is, if you can't find it, build it. You can create your own organization. And so I'll give you a quick case study of how I did that. When I opened 67 Orange Street, like I mentioned, it was during the Great Recession. There were a lot of other business owners in Harlem who were struggling like I was. So I saw the opportunity to collaborate. So a group of 9 of us got together and we said, hey, we are different businesses, but the issue that we all are seeing is the same. People aren't coming, shopping, spending time in Harlem, and we want them to do that. And so we can get them to do that. All of our businesses can rise, and we can also help each other along the way. And so we put together an idea of creating 360-degree programming, so conferences, marketing programs, promotional opportunities, and it's been a huge success. We started initially as 9 members. Today we're over 250 members, and 60% Black, 80% women, so it's pretty great. And it also, we've continued to expand our offerings. We now offer a program called the Harlem Local Vendor Program, which is focused business development. It sort of works as an accelerator. Businesses are accepted into the program, and not only do they learn everything that they need to be able to take their business from a small retailer to a large retailer, we actually can also even get them in the door with big name retailers. And so pretty awesome program. It's the inside track in a lot of ways. So this is an example of, hey, it didn't exist and I saw an opportunity, so I worked with my community to build a great program that helps us all. The last thing I want to say here before having one more sort of question here is, it's so important with all of this that you stay, like I said, stay woke, stay aware, but also get involved. Get involved, stay visible in your community, stay visible in your trade organizations, whatever you're involved with, have a say, because getting recognized opens up more doors for you. If you're recognized as people for what you're doing and for what you're saying, you have a greater opportunity to just be, to really stand out and get additional resources that you might not have even known. So with that, I want to say thank you so much. Again, I wish I could see your faces. I wish I could get to know each of you individually. Please feel free to check out 67 Orange Street, Anchor Spa, and Uncle Waithley's when it's in market. And feel free to reach out to me or at any point on Mr. Karl Franz on Twitter and IG. And thank you so much. Thank you for your time. I hope you got something great out of this.